We're in the Gemara, towards the bottom of Daf Vav Amud Beis. The first word on the line is Kachim, where it says Rabbi Yochanan Amar. The Gemara here is discussing the leftovers of a Korban Pesach, which is used as a shlamim. So the Gemara here will tell us a few different halachas on this. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan said, Aldo, regarding this halacha, Olil Rabbi Chanina argued with the Chachamim. And he said as follows, the Inon Amrin, the Chachamim say, Ein Pesach mishtana l'shem shlamim. When you're going to bring a Korban Pesach, that it's leftovers and you're bringing it in the rest of the year. So we said that the leftovers of the Pesach becomes a shlamim, but it does not change to become a shlamim unless you actually shecht it l'shem shlamim. If you shechted it l'shem oila or l'shem anything else, but not l'shem shlamim, it will not become a shlamim. But Va'ani Reb Chanina said, I argue and say, Afil l'shachte l'shem oila, even if you shechted it l'shem oila, it doesn't matter. Every Korban Pesach that's shechted during the year automatically becomes a shlamim. So Rav Ila explained, Taimeh de Rabbi Yochanan. The basis of this halacha that Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Reb Chanina is because the pasuk that we brought before, Im menatzayin karbonai, lezevach shlamim, if you're bringing from tzayin, and the Gemara said that this includes min hatzayin, includes also the Korban Pesach that's brought min hatzayin, so it becomes a shlamim. The pasuk says lezevach shlamim. It could have said Im menatzayin karbonai shlamim. Why does it say the word zevach shlamim? So we learn from this, kol shehu zevach, however it was shechted for, whether it was shechted to be a shlamim, sorry about that, whether it was shechted to be an oila, it doesn't matter. Whatever it was shechted for, it automatically becomes a korban shlamim. That's the reason for Rabbi Yochanan. Now the Gemara has the following shaila: Umishtane lemachsheves psul. What's if he was bringing the korban Pesach, that is, not on Pesach, but during the year, and instead of having the kavanah for shlamim, as we were speaking about over here, he had the kavanah l'shem oila. But besides that, he also had a machsheves psul. He had the machshava to do the halach, to be makriv of the korban, not the way it's supposed to. So the question is, will it change? Will it change to become a shlamim or not? So there's two issues here, because not only did he think that it should be used as an oila, he also was having a machsheves psul. So maybe then it does not change from being a Pesach to become a shlamim. So the Gemara asks, what kind of a question is this? Hey Chavida, what's the case? Shachta l'shem oila. If you shechted it as an oila, thinking that it should be an oila, al menas lizrek dama l'machar, and he had a machsheves psul. This is the machshava of pigel, that he's going to do the zrika in the wrong time. He's going to do the zrika tomorrow. That's the case that your question was. Either way, this is a korban that's going to be pasul. It's pigel. So what's the relevance of your question if you shechted the Pesach during the year, the shem oila, and also with a machsheves psul? Your question is, does it become a shlamim or not? But either way, it's pasul. So the Gemara says, no, the nafkamina will be as follows. The nafkamina will be whether it'll be pigel or not. We had this before when we learned the Gemara Pesachim. There's a rule regarding pigel. A korban does not become pigel unless everything else about the korban is kosher. Then pigel takes effect, and there's the special status of pigel, which means that you chayav kares if you eat it. But if besides the fact that it's pigel, it's also not a kosher korban for other reasons, so then even if it's pasul, but it won't be pigel, and therefore there's no kares. So therefore the nafkamina here will be as follows. In Teimar, if you're going to say mishtane lemachsheves psul, that even when you had this machsheves psul of pigel, and also you were thinking that you're bringing it as an oila, but nevertheless it does become a shlamim, and now this is a shlamim which you had a machshava of pigel, so then pigel, then it will become pigel, and you'll be chayav kares. In Teimar, but if you're going to say ein mishtane lemachsheves psul, that because you were thinking that it should be an oila, and then you also thought machshava of pigel, but because it's pasul, besides the fact that it's pigel, because when you think that it should be an oila, it does not become a shlamim, it remains like a Pesach that you're bringing in the rest of the year, so it's anyways pasul. Besides it being pigel, so then the girsa you have to be goyres here is pasul. Then it's only going to be pasul, but it's not going to be pigel, because it's pasul without it being pigel, so it cannot become pigel. So that's the relevance of the shaila that was asked over here. And the Gemara doesn't give an answer. Another question regarding the Korban Pesach that was brought not in its time on Yudal Nissen. It was brought, let's say you were makdish your Korban Pesach on a Shchedish Nissen, and you bring your Korban Pesach early, before that time. And he brings the Korban L'shmai v'shalei L'shmai. You're bringing it having in mind that it should be for the Korban Pesach, but also thinking that it should be as a shlamim. So you have two of these machshavas, Bishar, Yemayis Hashana, and one of the other days of the year before it came the time on Yudal Nisan. So what's going to be the halacha? Do I say because you thought of it to be Lishma, so you're bringing a Pesach in the rest of the year, so it's going to be Pasul? Or do I say, since you had a kavanah shaloi lishma, that it should be for a shlamim, so therefore it's going to be good? This is a discussion that the Gemara speaks about in Masechta Pesachim and the Bavli as well. So Rabbon Bar Chiyeh b'Shem Shmuel Bar Abba said, Mikivin she'ein loy shein. Since you had a kavanah shaloi lishma, that it should be brought for a shlamim. Nasu, so then what I compare this to is k'sheichtei lishmai v'shaloi lishmai, just like any carbon Pesach that you brought before its time, and you brought it lishma and shaloi lishma b'shtike, with being quiet. What does the Gemara mean b'shtike? Any time a person would take a carbon Pesach, and he brings it before its time. So if you don't have anything in mind, what is that carbon? Automatically that carbon is a carbon Pesach. It's being brought before its time. It's been designated for a carbon Pesach. So stam, I say that it's a carbon Pesach. But nevertheless, you have in mind that it should be brought as a shlamim. That uproots the stam of the carbon, which would be a Pesach. It was designated for a Pesach.
It's not bringing their Pesach after the Pesach.
You're right, it can't. But still, the actual behemah, you designated it for a Pesach.
Right, but then you checked it before.
Before the time, right? So if you shechted it before the time, what's going to happen? And you have in mind shaloi lishma, that it should be brought as a shlamim. So the fact that you had in mind that it should be brought as a shlamim, it uproots the status that it had as a Pesach to become a shlamim. So just like that's true in such a case where this was done b'shtike, meaning you never had a beferish kavanah that it should be brought as a Pesach. You just brought it as what it is. It's l'chatchila was a Pesach, but since you had a kavanah for shaloi lishma, which is for a shlamim, it uproots its status for a Pesach. Well, who kasher, right? So therefore he says the same thing over here. If you brought a carbon Pesach before its time, and you were thinking that it should be for a Pesach, but then you also were thinking that it should be for a shlamim, what you thought second, that it should be for a shlamim, uproots the status of what you thought first, that it should be a Pesach, and therefore it'll be kosher. That's the comparison he makes. Amalei, so then he said to him, and if this is the comparison, Im Kain, who, if so, afil shachter l'shmai. So maybe we could take this even a step further. If you shechted it l'shem Pesach, al manas lizroik damai shalei l'shmai, al manas to sprinkle the blood shalei l'shma. So the shechita was totally with the kavanah that it should be for a Pesach, and then the kavanah that it should be for a shlamim was only regarding the zrike. So, should I say, Yasa Mishar Rishayna, that it should be considered from the beginning, Kesheichtay Lishmai Vishaloi Lishmai Bishtike, it should be just like you did the Shechita itself for a carbon Pesach, even if you didn't have it in mind Beferish, it was just Bishtike. You just took the carbon Pesach and brought it stam, so it was a carbon Pesach, and then you also had in mind Shaloi Lishma, which is for the Shlamim, and then what happens via Hey Kasha? It should be kosher. In other words, what he's saying is, by a carbon Pesach that was brought before its time, you brought it as a Pesach. That's what it automatically is. It is a Pesach. But then you had in mind that the Zrika should be for a Shlamim. Isn't that enough to uproot it from being a Pesach to become a Shlamim, even if it was only regarding the Zrika that you had that Kavanah? So should we apply back the same thing and say as well, that if you had L'chatchila befeidish a Kavanah for L'shem Pesach, and then you had a Kavanah for the Zrika L'shem Shlamim, that it should be kosher? Again, this was discussed in the Gemara and Pesachim. Yeah, it's the main thing. Yeah, it was there in the Gemara Pesachim. Yeah. Amar Rab Abba Mari, so Rab Abba Mari said, I disagree to the whole premise of your question. Ma Neymar, what are we going to say? What's the halacha? B'shtike. If he did the shchita without thinking anything, he did the shchita b'shtike quietly, and he brought it, the Pesach, he's bringing a Pesach quietly. And then only afterwards for the Zrika he thinks that he's doing it for a Shlamim. Kosher? Is that actually going to be kosher as a Shlamim? Or perhaps maybe even in that case, I have a question about this. I'm not actually sure. Maybe in such a case, since he only thought about the Zrika to be L'Shem Shlamim, maybe it will still be puzzle. So the whole premise of your question that you were saying that in such a case it will for sure be good because he thought for the Zrika to be for a Shlamim is not necessarily true. And again, the Gemara doesn't resolve this question.
You're going to come to the base of Mikdash, you can tell the Kohen, I'm doing this, the Shem Pesach on Yud Beis Nisan.
Right. This is what happened. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's there. Okay. Meiser Nazir. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah, the leftovers of a Nazir, Linadava. That becomes for the donations, for the use, for the Mizbeach, in times when the Mizbeach is empty. Rav Chisda Amar, not Rav Chisda said, when is this the case? V'hu shekarva chatase b'saif. That's only if the chatos of the Nazir is brought at the end. When it comes to a Nazir, there are 3 different karbanos that every Nazir have to bring. The Ayla, a Shlamim, and a Chatas. So even though there is an order of how they have to be brought, but it's not ma'akiv. Whatever order you bring, your yaitze, your mitzvahs of bringing the carbon of a Nazir. So he's saying that the only time I say that the leftovers of a Nazir will become an adava for the Mizbeach, that's if the Chatas is brought at the end. But if the Ayla is brought the last, or the Shlamim is brought the last, so then the leftovers, what's the halach of the leftovers of an Ayla? It becomes an Ayla. The leftovers of a Shlamim become a Shlamim. If it's only if the Chatas is brought the last, then I say the leftovers of a Chatas, the halacha always is that it becomes an adava for the Mizbeach. So the same thing will be over here. Avali karvu Shlamim b'saif. If the Shlamim is brought last, Maisran Shlamim, then the leftovers is a Shlamim. This is Rav Chisda. Amar Rav Zira disagrees and says, Afila karvu Shlamim l'basayif, even if the Shlamim is brought last, halacha achasi benazir, the halacha by nazir is that it's all one, shetia maisra nadava, that the leftovers will become a nadava. Since part of the karbanis of a nazir is also a chatas, so even if that chatas was brought earlier, and now the leftovers is only a leftovers from the shlamim, that's what was brought last, but it doesn't matter. There's a halacha l'moshe misinai by the nazir that whatever is left over of it should become an adava. So now the Gemara says, Masnita Messiah l'ledain, or Masnita Messiah l'ledain. We have a braisa that will prove, that will bring a raya to one opinion, and a braisa raya to the other opinion. Masnita Messiah l'Rab Zira, we have a braisa that's a proof for Rab Zira's opinion, because it says in the braisa as follows. Elohein mois stumen. These are monies that were put aside, and it was not specified which monies should be used for what. So again, as I said, the nazir has to bring a oila, a shlamim, and a chatas. So if the nazir puts aside money to bring all of his karbanis, and he did not specify which part of the money should be for the chatas, which for the oila, which for the shlamim, so then kol shedmei chatas mesais mu'uraves behen. If you have the money of a chatas, that's from a person that even died, that is mixed into this money, so then the leftovers of this will become a nedava. And the Gemara adds, "Va'afile hifrish demei chatas mitzoicha." And even if you then went and separated money to be specifically for the chatas, mois stumin hein, this is considered to be money that the chatas is mixed into it, and therefore the leftovers will be a nedava. So what do we see in this braisa? Even after you separated from this money that l'chatchila included chatas in it, then you separated money specifically for the chatas. So now the leftover money is only for the oila and the shlamim. And then you had the person died, meisais, the person died, and you have the leftovers of the oila and the shlamim. It'll have the status like a chatas, like leftovers of a chatas, which is in a dove, exactly like Rabbi Zira said. Masnita Messiah Rav Chisda. We have another braisa that's a raya to Rav Chisda. Eilu lechatasi, a person says this money should be a nazir. We're speaking about a nazir that says this money should be for my chatos. Vahashar, and the rest l'shar nezirusi, for my other karbanis that I have to bring as a nazir, which is an oila and a shlamim. Umeis, and the person dies. So what's the halacha when the person dies? So the braisa here is saying that the person dies. What happens if a person dies? What do you do with the carbon chatas? The carbon chatas has to be taken out to graze and then to become puzzle, and then you could when a person dies and didn't bring his carbon chatas, the carbon chatas has to be left to die. This is what's called chatois hamesais. It's left to die. And then the braisa says, mayalin bekulan, ve'ein mayalin b'miktsasan. What does this mean? So here's the halacha regarding me'ila. Me'ila, for a carbon oila, because it's kachay kachim, and it has to totally be burnt on the mizbeach, if you have any hana of it before it's brought, there's a halacha of me'ila. You mayal in that. By carbon shlamim, it's not so. What's carbon shlamim designated for? For the bailam to eat it. Big part of the shlamim, the bailam eat. So therefore, by carbon shlamim, there is no me'ila. Only after the zrike of the dam on the mizbeach, then there's the me'id, it's possible for there to be me'ila on the shlamim. So if you have money that has mixed oila and shlamim into it, and you used from that money, is there me'ila or not? because of the money of Oyla that's in it, there should be Meila. Because money of the Shlamim in it, there should not be Meila. So the Braisa says, Mayalim bekulan, if you used all the monies, then you're going to be Mayal, because you definitely used the money of the Oyla as well. But ve'ein Mayalim b'miktsasan, if you only use part of the money, so that part that you used could be from the Shlamim, so there's no Meila there. This is the Braisa. So now the Gemara clarifies and says, V'loi Omar, it does not say here in this Braisa that im meis yiplu l'nedava, that if there was the money for the chatas there, so if he dies, the money should go to a nedava. What does it say over here? The money does not go to a nedava. Right? Because he separated the money of the chatas, so therefore the other karbanis, the Oyla and the Shlamim, it does not go to a nedava. So this is like what Rav Chisda said, that because you were makriv the karban chatas earlier, and then the Oyla and the Shlamim are left afterwards, so the Oyla and the Shlamim, what happens to their leftovers? It becomes a Oyla, it becomes a Shlamim. So too in this Braisa, what did it say? Umeis, when you die, so what do? The karban chatas is left to die. And the Oyla and the Shlamim, the leftovers of the Oyla and the Shlamim, it doesn't say that it becomes an Nedava. So therefore we see, like Rav Chisda said. Rav Chisda said another halacha. Meise lachmai shel nazir, the leftovers of the bread of the nazir, together with the carbon of a nazir, there was also breads that were brought, which was in the Chitas in this week. We're learning it in the Chumash. Parashas Tzav speaks about the carbon Taida. Yurkav should be left to rat. There's nothing you can do with it. It can't be used for another carbon. Rav Yesi said, V'ya'os. This was well said. Why? La'kriva b'fnei atzmai einat yachol. To bring the bread as a carbon mincha for itself, you can't. She'ein lecha lechem karav la'atzmai. There's no bread that's ever brought for itself. La'kriva yim niziris acheres einat yachol. To use it for another nazir, you also can't. She'ein lecha niziris ba b'loi lechem. Any person that becomes a nazir, when he takes upon himself to be a nazir, he has to designate his own breads. He can't use the breads from someone else. Therefore we have to say, the leftovers of the breads of a nazir, Yurkav, has to be left to rat. Sovereign Meimar. So now that the Talmidim, when they heard this halacha from Rav Chisda, they thought to say that hu lachmai, hu ma'isa nesachav. The same halacha that we're saying regarding the breads, that it's left to rat, the same halacha applies regarding the leftovers of the nesachim, of the wines that were used on the mizbeach, that it also has to be left and it can't be used at all. Rabbi Yesi Barabun said, no, that's not, you can't compare the two. Ma'isa nesachav, the leftovers of the wine, kache kachim inun, since the wine is kache kachim, v'yiplu l'nedava. Any leftovers of kache kachim, like a chatas, becomes a nedava for the mizbeach. The breads which are eaten from the nazir have a halach of kachim kala. The wine which is totally poured in the mizbeach and nobody else has any anah of it, that has a status of kache kachim, and therefore the leftovers become an adava. Gemara says, Al daite de Rabbi Yesi barabun, according to what Rabbi Yesi now said, and we take out the word Shmuel here, most of the Mefarshim are not guided Shmuel here. Al liba de Rav Chisda, so this that Rabbi Yesi barabun said according to Rav Chisda, b'maisin esachim, regarding this maisin esachim, that since it's kache kachim, therefore it becomes an adava. So Rav Chisda, that's the gersa, that not Rav Chia, but Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda, Rabbi Lazar, and here you have to put in Shmuel. Rav Chisda and Shmuel and Rabbi Lazar, they all said the same halacha, that anything that's kache kachim, the leftovers, becomes an adava for the mizbeach. Rav Chisda, ahoda amara. Rav Chisda, this that was just said on the halacha of Rav Chisda, that only the leftover breads have to be left to rat, but the leftover wine becomes kache kachim. Since it's kache kachim, that is, it becomes an adava. Shmuel, where do we see that Shmuel holds of this? Rabbi Yesi, because Rabbi Yesi said, we had this before in the Gemara, Adda not Taman, when I was in Bavel, Shamet Kail Rabbi Yehuda Shal Shmuel, I heard the voice of Rabbi Yehuda asking Shmuel, Hifrish Shiklei Umeis, a person that separated money for the Machzas HaShekel and then he died. What do we do with the Machzas HaShekel? Amalei Yiplul in Adava. It should be an Adava. Why should it be an Adava? Because the Machzas HaShekel is used for the Karbanis Tzibor, which are Kache Kachim. So therefore the leftovers of that is an Adava. So we see that Shmuel holds that the leftovers of Kache Kachim is an Adava. And Rabbi Eliezer said, Meisa Asiris Ha'efa Shaloi, the leftovers of the Asiris Ha'efa, of the carbon mincha, of the Kohen Gadol, what do you do with it? Rabbi Yochanan says, you can't do anything with it, you can take it to the Yam HaMelech and pour it out over there. Rabbi Eliezer Yiplul in Adava, since the carbon mincha of the Kohen Gadol is Kache Kachim, so therefore it becomes an Adava. So these are the three Amirayim that held that any leftovers of Kache Kachim becomes an Adava. Zok the Mishnah, another halacha regarding leftovers. Maisa shvuyim, the leftovers of tzedakah that was collected for people that were in captivity. So you had leftovers of this tzedakah. L'shvuyim, keep it for the future if you would become into use for need to redeem other people from captivity. Maisa shavoi, money that was collected for a specific individual that was in captivity. La'isa shavoi, has to be for that person. Maisa aniyim, leftover monies of tzedakah that was collected for poor people. Aniyim, keep it for the future for other aniyim. Maisa ani, the leftovers money for one particular ani. La'isa ani, keep it for that ani if he needs it in the future. Maisa meisim, leftover monies that was collected for the need, for the burial of a person. Lemeisim, it should be used. So if it was collected for all people that need assistance in their burial, lemeisim, so use it for other meisim. Maisa meis, if money was collected for one particular meis, liyarshav, so then you give it to the ones that are inheriting him. Rab Meir argues and says, no, maisa meis yemunach at sheyav Eliyahu. It's going to have to sit until Eliyahu Navi comes, because he had a suffix what should be done with it. So he says it has to remain for Eliyahu Navi to tell us. Rab Nassan says, Meiser Meis, the leftovers of the money collected for someone's burial, Bainin loy nefesh al kivra. Use it for the matzeva, to build him a monument on his kever. So therefore, Rab Meir had a suffix, if we do like the Tanakama, that it goes to the Yershim, or like the Rab Nassan, that it goes for a nefesh al kivra, and therefore he said, just leave it for Eliyahu Navi to decide. If you collected money for somebody thinking that he doesn't have any money for his burial, and then you find out that there's enough money available and the money was not at all used for this person's burial. So what do? Rabbi Yirmiyah thought to say, so just like it said in the Mishnah that you used money for this person's burial, but there was leftover money, so it goes to the Yershim. So the same is here, even if none of it got used at all, it goes to the Yershim. Amalei Rabidi, the Rabidi from Chutres said, Hagatzmach. Think to yourself, is what you're saying make sense? The lekavnen elalei, people that gave this tzedakah only gave it for the purpose of this person's burial. In other words, how can you compare it to the Mishnah? In the Mishnah, the money was used for this person's burial, and there was leftovers. So the leftovers goes for the Yershim. But over here, it turns out that the money was not at all needed for this cause. So how could you give it to the Yershim? Amalei. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says to him, Ana loy amaris. I didn't say the halacha that I said with certainty. I saw it, I was thinking, I'm not sure about this. At minon loch. And you're saying with such certainty that we can't compare this case. Are you so sure about this? So the Gemara leaves it sort of as a suffix, what you do with this money that was not used at all for the cause of the burial that it was collected for. Tani b'shem Rab Nassan, in the name of Rab Nassan we learned, Meiser Ameis, Yivnu le nefesh al kivroi, the leftover money of a mace that was collected for a mace, you build a matzev on his cave. And also there's another thing that it can be used for, v'yasalei ziluf al gabe mitosei. They use to sprinkle wine on the mace in order to take away the bad aroma. It can be used for that as well. Tani, we learned, and Abraise, ein poidin shavoi b'shavoi. You do not redeem a person that's in captivity from money that was used, that was collected for another person that was in captivity. That's shavi b'shavi. And also, ve'ein goivin talis b'talis. You can't collect money for one person that was in captivity and then use it for another person. Sorry, again, one person that needs a talis, that needs tzedakah to buy a talis, to buy clothing. You can't use it for a different person that needs clothing. But ve'ein memachin biyad parnosim lekach. Those got bayim of tzedakah. When they use the money of tzedakah that was designated for one person, they take it for someone else, we're not going to protest against them. Tani Rab Shimon ben Gamliel said, Ein oisin nefashos letzadikim. We don't have to make a monument for the tzadikim on their kever. Divreyim, their words of Torah, hein zechreinam. That is the greatest memory for them. When you learn their Torah, so then you don't need more than of a mitzvah. That's their memory. Rabbi Yechanan, so the Gemara brings a story in connection to this. Rabbi Yechanan have a mismach va'ozel al Rab Chia bar Abba. He was walking and he was leaning on Rab Chia bar Abba. Hoya Rab Eliezer chamile. Rab Eliezer came from a distance and he saw Rab Yechanan and he hid from in front of Rab Yechanan. V'amar Rab Yechanan said, Halein tarti milayu hadeim bavla ovid lepei. This person from Bavel, which was Rabbi Eliezer, there are two things that he did that I'm not happy about. Chada, one thing I'm not happy about, the Leishal B'Shleime. He sees me from a distance and he doesn't come to say Shalom Aleichem. And V'chada, and another thing I'm not happy with him is Mitamer. He's hiding from me. Why is he hiding from me? Amalei Rav Yaakov Baridi, he said Rav Yaakov Baridi, they wanted to be Malamet Schus, and Rabbi Eliezer said, Kach Nehigin Gabain. This is the custom of the way the people in Bavel act. The Ze'ire Leishal B'Shleime Derabbe. Someone that's on a lower level does not come and approach a person that's on a higher level to say Shalom Aleichem to him. Out of respect, he doesn't say Shalom Aleichem. The Inon Nogin Umekaimin, their custom is that they fulfill what the pasuk says, Ra'uni Nadim V'nechbu. The young lads saw me and they hid. V'yishishim kamu v'amadu. The older ones got up and stood in front of me. So therefore he hid from me. Amar Lahu, so Rabbi Yechanan said, Mal Amar Lahu. So this is the Limud Schos that Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi said for Rabbi Eliezer. But then the Gemara brings another Limud Schos that he said for him. Amar Lahu, Mahu lemevat kami da adura tzalmi. So he asked him a question that will lead to another Limud Schos. So he asks him the following question. Are you allowed to walk in front of this Avodah Zarah? Tzalmi is Avodah Zarah, this Avodah Zarah called Adura. You're allowed to walk there. Amalei, Rabbi Yechanan said, Mat poligle yokor. Why are you giving this honor for this Avodah Zarah to say that you shouldn't be allowed to walk in front of it? If you give it honor, so then you don't walk it in front of it. Avar kamai, just walk wherever you want to go. V'sami einai, just close your eyes and walk wherever you want to go. Don't make an issue out of the Avodah Zarah that you don't want to walk in front of it out of respect. So now he said, Omalei Yos Rabbi Eliezer Ovid Le'Over Kamach. If so, now you'll understand why Rabbi Eliezer didn't walk in front of you, because of the honor and the respect and the fear that he had of you. Therefore, he didn't walk in front of you. Okay, but Rabbi Yechanan was not appeased with all this, because as we see here, that there was really another reason why he was upset with Rabbi Eliezer. But there's another thing that this Bavla, this Rabbi Eliezer from Bavel did. He would repeat things that I taught him, and he didn't say it in my name. That was the main reason he was upset. So this is connected to the Gemara before when we spoke about saying over a person's the thing, Divrei Torah, after he passes away. So he was upset that he didn't say the Divrei Torah in his name. Nichnasu l'fanav Rabami v'Rabasi. So Rabami and Rabasi went to Rabbi Yechanan to appease him. Amru Loi, they said to him, Rabbi, Kacha Yamaisa b'Veis HaKnesses Shel Tarsiim. This is the incident that happened in this shul of the Tarsiim, which is the coppersmiths. Ben Nager, they were arguing about a Nager sheyesh beroishe glustere. There's this piece of wood that's used to close the door. How do they translate Nager there? When they would lock the doors in those times, they would stick the piece of wood into the ground, and it has a sort of a knob on the tip of it as a glustere. So the question is this muktzah on Shabbos? It could also be used to crush things. It could be used also for food items. But the question is, because it's a piece of wood, is it muktzah or not? Shenechlaku Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yosi. So there was a big argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yosi about this, and the argument became so heated and so fierce that they came to rip a Sefer Torah with their anger. So the Gemara asks, really? They actually went and ripped a Sefer Torah? The Gemara says, no. Elo, what happened was Shenikra Sefer Torah. They were learning and they had a Sefer Torah, and one was pulling it in one direction, another was pulling it in the other direction, and the Sefer Torah got torn. And there was an older person there, Rabbi Yosi ben Kisma. This was Rabbi Yosi ben Kisma, and Omar, he said, Miyani, I wonder if this shul will not one day turn into a Beis Avodah Zarah after such an incident that's cut out of the anger. So because of this place will become a Beis Avodah Zarah. So basically what Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi are telling Rabbi Yechanan is, don't be upset at Rabbi Eliezer. You see what happens out of anger, what can happen. So he's trying to appease him with this. But Rabbi Yechanan answered Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi and said, Hakedein mechavre? Are you talking to me as if Rabbi Eliezer is my friend, that I have an argument with him? I'm his teacher and he's my student. He has an obligation to say other things in my name. So this is not, he didn't accept this analysis, this comparison to the story that happened in the argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yosi. Nichnas l'fanav Rabbi Yaakov Baridi. So then Rabbi Yaakov Baridi came to Rabbi Yechanan and Amalei and said to him, Ksiv, the pasuk says, Kashet tziva Hashem es Moshe Avda. Like Hashem commands Moshe Avda, Kain tziva Moshe es Yeshua. This is what Moshe told Yeshua. This is a pasuk in Yeshua that describes what Yeshua said. Everything Yeshua said was what the Eibishter commanded Moshe. So now Rabbi Yaakov Beridi said, "V'chikol dibu dibusha Yeshua Yeshiv v'Deirish." Is it every single time, every single word that Yeshua sat and said, "Hayayim"? He would also say, "Kachama Moshe." This is what Moshe said. No, he didn't do that. Ela Yeshua Yeshiv v'Deirish. Yeshua would darshan and say halachas. V'yedin akel sha'ateidah shel Moshe. Everybody knows that Yeshua doesn't say things from his own. He knows that it comes. Everyone knows that it comes from Moshe. Afata, it's the same with you. Eliezer Yeshiv v'Deirish. Eliezer is darshaning and akel yedin. Everybody knows sha'ateidah shel Chahi, that the Torah that he says is really yours. So he didn't have to say it beferish because everyone knows it. That was the limud schos on Rabbi Eliezer. Amalehen, this Rabbi Yechanan accepted, and then he actually said, "Why couldn't you appease me? Why couldn't you clarify this to me like Benidi, our friend?" Okay, so this he accepted. Now the Gemara says, "Rabbi Yechanan, my kula hai the boy the yemim shmaitim shmei." Why was he so particular about this that he wanted that the halacha should be said in his name? What difference does it make? The divrei Torah is being said, so what's the difference? So the Gemara brings the sources because we also find David Bikish Aleh Rachamim. David also asked that the divrei Torah should be said in his name. Shanama, the pasuk says in Tillim, Agura ba'alcha ilamim, I should live in your tent forever. Echsa b'seisa knafecha sela, and I should be in the shade of your hands forever. V'chiyol sal daita shedavid shechai v'kayim lo ilamim. Did David HaMelech think that it'll live forever? What was he asking for? Elakacham David lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shel Olam, Eske sheyiu dvarein nemarim bebatik nesiyas bebatim medrashas. I should be zeiche that my divrei Torah, which refers actually to the Tilim, should be said in Beis HaKnesses and Beis HaMedrash all the time. So he wanted his name and his Torah to be mentioned in the Beis HaKnesses and the Beis HaMedrash all the time. So Rabbi Yechanan wanted the same. Shimon is ziri b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak Omar. He said, "Kol Talmud Chacham she'omer dvar halacha mipiv b'olam hazeh." Any Talmud Chacham that words of halacha are said in his name in this world, tzfasav reichashais imay bakever. His lips are moving with him in his kever. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, v'chichech kayayin atoiv. Your mouth is like it has good wine in it. And then it says, doiviv sifse yeshanim. The mouth of those that are slumbering, those that are buried, are moving. What's the comparison here? Ma kaimesh anovim zeh. Just like when you have a bowl of grapes and you touch it. So kivin shemaniach adam etzboyolov, you place your hands on moist grapes. Miyad doiviv, the grapes, the wine oozes out. Afsef sesayim shel tzadikim, kivin she'emrim dvar halacha mipiyem shel tzadikim. When you say the dvar halacha in the name of a tzaddik that passed away, sef sesayim merachshay simon bakever. Their lips are moving in the kever. And the Rebbe once brought this Gemara and said what that means is that it reverberates in the entire world. Just like when you have any movement in one place in the world, so it reverberates in the rest of the world. That's the teva, right? Just like you throw a rock into water, it reverberates in the rest of the water. The same is also in the airspace. So the point the Gemara is saying over here is that the kayach of the tzaddik reverberates into the entire world. Ma hanohalei. What is the actual benefit that a tzaddik has from the fact that divrei Torah are said in his name? Bar Nezira Amar, the comparison he gave was kadein de shtei konditen, like drinking 2 cases of konditen, which was some kind of a mixture of wine and honey and spices. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, Rabbi Yitzchak says kadein de shasi chamar atik, like someone that drinks old wine. Afagav de shasi le, even if he drank it a while ago, taime bepume, the taste is still in his mouth. So this is the Indian of the source of where you see that they wanted that the Torah should be said in their name. Rav Gidl said, when you say over a divrei Torah in the place of in the name of a certain person, you should picture as if the person you're saying in his name is right there across you. Shanema, the pasuk says, with the image of the person that you're saying the divrei Torah from him should be in front, walk with you, should go in front of you. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Rav Adam Yikra Ish Chazdai, that what does this mean? Rav Adam Yikra Ish Chazdai Zeh Shar Kol Adam. This refers to all people. When it says Rav Adam, it means all people. Yikra Ish Chazdai, they say over the Torah. Chazdai, the Mepharshim say goes on Torah. Torah is called Torah's Chesed in the pasuk. So they say over Divrei Torah in the name of people, and they're not very particular about who is the one that said it. But v'isha munim mi yimtza, who could find someone that's more faithful and more particular about making sure that when he says over something that in a person's name that he actually said it. And who is this? Rab Zeira. Rab Zeira would make sure that the one that he says it over in his name actually said it. The Amar Rab Zeira, because we know that Rab Zeira said, Lesnon srichin chashashin L'shmaite de Rav Sheshes. We don't have to be concerned about what Rav Sheshes said and the things that Rav Sheshes says over in the name of certain people. Why don't we have to be concerned? The reason is Dahu Gavre Maftecha. Because Rav Sheshes is a person that had an open heart, and whatever he says over, he's very particular about what he says over, and therefore we don't have to be concerned about Rav Sheshes. So the fact that Rav Zeira said this regarding Rav Sheshes, we see that otherwise he was very particular about who he said over things from, as the Gemara is going to quote here in a moment. There are other Mefarshim that actually say the pshat regarding Rav Sheshes is the exact opposite. Rav Sheshes was blind. We just learned this in the Gemara Pesachim. Rav Yosef and Rav Sheshes were blind. So Rav Sheshes, he said that when he says over in the name of Rav Sheshes, he's very concerned to know if Rav Sheshes actually knows who he heard it from. Since he was blind, so therefore Lav Dafka Rav Sheshes knew who he was learning from. So the Girsa is, not the Girsa, the interpretation over here is less non srichin chashasha. We should be concerned when we say over something the name of Rav Sheshes. Did he know? Because he gavre maftecha. Maftecha means he has open eyes. This is like a lashon of Sagi Noher, that he was blind, so therefore we should be concerned. And we see again, Rav Zeira was very particular about this. Omle Rav Zeira le Rav Asi. He said to Rav Asi, Chakim Rebbe le Bar Pasya, are you clear about Bar Pasya, that you say over Divrei Torah in his name? Did you learn from him directly that Shmaita Mishmei, you say over things in his name, you know for sure that he said it? And Amalei Rab Yaisi, so Amalei, so he answered him, Rav Asi answered him, Rab Yechanan Amra Mishmei. When I'm saying over things from Bar Pasya, Rabbi Yechanan is the one that said it from Bar Pasya, so therefore I rely on Rabbi Yechanan. Similar thing, Amle Rab Zira le Rav Asi. Rab Zira said to Rav Asi, Chakim Rebbe le Rav, that do you know for sure when you say over things in the name of Rav, the Ad Oma Shmait Mishmei, you're saying over halachas in his name, do you know for sure that Rav is the one that said it? Amalei, so he said to him, I'm relying on Rav Ada Barava. Rav Ada Barava Amra Mishmei, Rav Ada Barava said it in his name, and therefore I'm relying on him. So we see here that Rav Zeira was very particular in saying over things in the name of the person that said it. The Rebbe has different places. The Rebbe speaks about this inyan of Kolayim David B'Shem Maimrei Mevegulu La'ilam. The whole inyan of Divrei Torah is not just the chachma of it, it's also the Torah, then it's the nice and Torah. So when you say over in someone's name, and it traces back to where it comes from, all the way to Moshe Misinai, so that's the receiving Torah from the Eibishter, the nice and Torah, not just the chachma of the Torah. That's one of the inyanim of saying over B'Shem Maimrei. Now the Gemara brings back an inyan that it says regarding David HaMelech. We mentioned before David HaMelech, so the Gemara says, Ein dor she'en bo litzanim. There's no generation that there are no litzanim. Kedoirei shel David, just like we find that there were litzanim, those scoffers and mockers in the generation of David HaMelech. Ma hoye prutzei adorais. What would the prutzim, the litzanim of that generation do? Hoye hayel chanetz l'chalaynesav shel David. They would go to the window where David HaMelech was, and Oimrim loyin, they would scream to him and say, David, David, eimesay yibana beis hamikdash, eimesay beis Hashem neilech. When are we going to build a Beis HaMikdash? When are we going to go to the house of Hashem? David HaMelech promised them they're going to build a Beis HaMikdash. V'hoya David Doimer, and David would say, Afal pishim iskavdan lahachiseini, even though their intent is to make me angry, Yavoy alai im lo yisi sameach b'devreyim. Something bad should happen to me if it won't be true that I actually am happy with what they are saying. Dichsiv samachti ba'oimrim li Beis Hashem neilech. I'm happy with those people that were mocking me, saying, let's go to build a house of the Eibishter. So David HaMelech wasn't zeicha to build a Beis HaMikdash, but he was happy with the fact that they were saying this. And then there's a pasuk that says, V'hoya ki yimlu yamecha. The Eibishter tells David HaMelech, when your life will come to its full time, V'shechavtas avisecha, you'll pass away with your forefathers. What is the Eibishter telling him? Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu David. The Eibishter tells David HaMelech, Yamim shleimim ani meinelach. I'm going to give you your days of your life complete. V'lo yamim chasedim. And I'm not going to miss even one day. Klum shleimim bin chayivne Beis HaMikdash. The only big mila when you're going to pass away is that Shlomo HaMelech is going to come and build a Beis HaMikdash. So what's going to be the big mila of the Beis HaMikdash? Ela lahakriv karbanas tzibur. Because you're going to bring karbanas there. Chavev alai tzedakah mishpat sha'ata oiseh. It's cherished upon me. The tzedakah and the righteousness and the justice that you do in this world, yaiser min hakarban, more than the karbanos that Shlomo HaMelech brings. Shenemar asay tzedakah mishpat nivchar lashem mizevach. When you have tzedakah and justice, that's more chosen to the Eibishter more than karbanos. Hadron alach mitzarfin shkalim.